The outlook for Ghana's economy is bright despite International Monetary Fund recommendations for cuts in government spending and in the management of the country's public debt. After first round of discussions, the IMF's end of mission release posted on its website noted Ghana continues to face significant domestic and external vulnerabilities on the back of a large fiscal deficit, a slowdown in economic growth and rising inflation. But Finance Minister Seth Terkper, earlier today on the Super Morning Show on Joy FM, said many of the recommendations are already in place. He spoke with Kujo Yankson.
I don't think that we should put it in such stark negative terms. You will recall that we identified problems with the economy. We call them challenges. We actually itemized them in the 2013 budget. You know, for example, wages, subsidy, the shortfall in petroleum. Then there was another issue, major one, you know, the lack of flow of gas, you know, through the West African gas pipeline. In the first year of implementation, the situation with the gas continued. Then we also suffered setbacks, which we have explained. Gold and cocoa prices fell, and it had an impact on the city. And therefore, when you are measuring performance, I think it is important as Ghanaians that we are also not too hard, you know, with ourselves, in the sense that everybody sacrificed. We increased taxes. We cut expenditures. We've managed to pay down significantly the single spine arrears. We have been doing automatic adjustments, but the setbacks did not help us achieve the desired result. As a result of which we have asked the IMF, you know, for assistance, as we normally do in about 8, you know, programs since the late 1990s. And therefore, I would think that what the IMF is reflecting is not a failure. It is just a reality that because of the further setbacks that the economy suffered, we could not achieve, you know, our target. This is something which we considered, you know, when we did the census, you know, declaration. I think luckily for us, the fundamentals of the economy continued to be strong, even when we were going through all these economic growth, respectively at 7%, 7.1 actually. We also at the point of getting our own gas to stabilize the supply of gas. You will recall earlier a week ago, even a workers' strike in Nigeria led to further disruption of gas. And then we are going into another round where we would be able to exploit more oil and gas. The funds acknowledge in its statement the caution that we should do more in order that, you know, we can realize the gains from that medium-term prospect. So this is the context in which I would put it. I wouldn't say that as a nation we have failed. I think that the measures we have put in place can compare with any, you know, IMF program which we have implemented in the past.
In spite of you know, the sort of the message you're sending, which is that actually what the government has done has worked, the IMF, there's lots of things to pick from this IMF statement that might contradict that view. For example, they're saying that you're going to miss the fiscal deficit target that you reset mid-year. Instead of 8.8, we're going to be finishing at 9.75 you know, on the deficit. What is accounting for this failure to meet the target that you yourself reset in June?
I don't think that I think categorically that the measures we put in place have worked. I am not contradicting, you know, what the IMF, you know, has said. I'm only saying that there are reasons for it. Our economy is one that can be affected for a very long time, you know, with power supply. We know that even in the past, before the West African gas pipeline, anytime the water levels at Kosovo have gone down. That's affected output. So I am only saying that there are reasons for not achieving the target. But I'm also saying that the situation is more hopeful than some of the, stark statements about failure which we hear, as His Excellency has been, preaching himself. So this is the fact.
Okay.
The situation, the reason why we did not achieve our target, I think I have given you some examples. Then when you don't get, let me be specific, when gas does not flow, it means power does not, and we lack supply of power, or we able to get power, we have to import light crude for our thermal plant. These two things themselves depress an economy. So you don't get the necessary output, whether by the private sector or public sector.
Mr. Tekpa, you mentioned electricity and power supply as having had an impact on our ability to meet our targets. But actually, yes, it occurs to me that in this second half of the year, power supply has actually been more stable than in the first half.
But precisely so. That is the message. That's the message. It's not just the power supply that has become more stable. We are also saying cocoa prices have recovered, even though gold prices have not recovered. And we are saying that, the situation would even have been better if we have had our own gas flowing, which is likely to happen by the end of the year. So this is what we mean when we say the economy will have a turn around. I think we are saying the same thing.
Right. Now, the IMF involvement, one of the expected outcomes would be that our investor confidence will be boosted. But Fitch maintains its B rating, keeping us 5 notches below investor grade. Are we expecting...
Because the indicators that Fitch uses have not changed yet. But even in the Fitch statement, you would notice that they also mention the medium-term prospects for the economy. The good thing is that the last time Fitch issued its statement, it was considered to be a downgrade, even though it was a negative outlook. Remember from 2012, when we started experiencing, these difficulties, we were D+ positive, and then we kept moving down to B. So a lot of people saw it as a downward slide. What is positive about the Fitch statement is that it has not done a further downgrade, which means that even though they are using current indicators, they also see that we have made some improvements. For example, I just said that one of the critical things from both the Fitch and IMF perspective is the amount of money that we spent on wages in the last 3 years, in particularly clearing arrears, which led to the deficit. As I just indicated, we have paid down the arrears significantly. We have had some consensus built, at home, which is guiding our wage policy. We used to have very huge, subsidies. We have all gone through the period of adjustment, adjusting petroleum and utility prices. I think that both Fitch and the IMF are looking at this, and therefore you will see that Fitch has not done a further downgrade. Our situation therefore can be said, even from a Fitch perspective, that it is stabilizing, and that is what the hopeful message which one would want to give to Ghanaians. We are not being complacent in saying that let us be hopeful, not at all. We are saying that we should also not be too despondent about our situation, or else we do not get out of it. Let me repeat that when it comes to power supply, gold or cocoa prices, I think that we have experiences of this, and we are changing the situation with our own gas supply to stabilize power. The His Excellency was saying just yesterday when he met Ghanaians here in the U.S., about adding value, to gold, for example. So we cited, two examples of gold processing plants in order that we stop exporting raw gold, just as we are also processing cocoa. So when you take, the fact that we are not flaring gas, when you take the fact that we are going to be starting some processing of gold, and when you take the fact that we are adding value in many respects and deepening our local content, it means that we are learning, from the things that have blocked the economy on occasion. And I think this is a message, which we want. This is essentially transformation message, or the transformation message of the government, which we want to be to underpin, the message of hope that we are, talking about.
Can you give us some timelines now that the first round is over? When can we expect the program to actually commence?
Well, we already agreed, with the IMF that we would continue the discussions around, the IMF World Bank annual meetings that would occur in Washington in early October. We would continue the negotiations then. We would hope to make progress because now they have gathered their data. They have told Ghanaians what they think. We would also continue with the discussions with them, highlighting the medium-term prospects. We would then agree or begin.
So there you have it. Finance Minister set up in a conversation with Super Morning Show's Kojo Yankson. Right now, let's delve further into this. Sydney Casely Hayford is a financial analyst and he's joined me over the telephone. We'll have a brief conversation on this. Sydney, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning to you too. When we look at this end of mission statement from the IMF team that came down here to Ghana, what is it that the team is trying to tell the Ghanaian people about the economy?
Well, they made two critical statements about the current state of the economy. The fact that the debt burden is very high and it will take some serious attention to be able to turn it around. And then secondly, the drift between the revenue and the expenses is still continuing and it is getting bigger. So they mentioned that, and they mentioned the fact that the fiscal deficit is growing. And those were the two fundamental things which we know already. So frankly, they didn't really tell us anything new in that regard.
I see. Like you said, that's basically not different from the problems we already know locally. But government over the time had also told us that it had been implementing some steps and measures to forestall some of these things. But it looks like from what we have been told, nothing has worked. What do you see?
Yes, it hasn't worked. Because if you claim that you have been implementing homegrown policies and you say that you have been doing this all the time, then we expect to see some turnaround. And we know that nothing has happened very seriously because even just as recently as July this year, the finance minister, in his medium-term review, revised his macroeconomic indicators and did admit the deficit was growing. So whatever homegrown policies they have put in place, they're either not implementing them or else they are not as effective as they would like it to be.
When we look at some of the projections from the end of mission statement, we see a deceleration of growth, or the growth of the economy. We also see how fiscal deficit is expected to rise up to 9.75% of GDP. Do you see same? What does it really say about the economy?
Well, with all of these predictions, they are only as good as the predictor indicators that are used. If the IMF is using its own predictor tables and coming out and saying there's going to be a deterioration, the government had already indicated that they didn't think that the drift would be that high. As an independent analyst and an onlooker of the numbers, I also say that the 9.75% is too low and it will be higher. I'm expecting something in excess of 10% going forward based on the way I see things and what I know to be happening. So we are all only as good as we predict. And the person who is more consistent in the outcome of the analysis is the person whose numbers we believe. So far, government has not done a very good job by predicting its end result. The IMF has never been able to get it exactly spot on. So I think that it will be somewhere between what they say and what I say, because mine is on the extreme end. And somewhere in between, we will get a number. However, the numbers have to be credible, they have to be reliable, and they have to be something that we can believe in, because right now there's a big question mark over whether or not the numbers that are coming out of the Ghana Statistical Service and the Central Bank are true numbers and accurate numbers that we can depend on.
I see, and this is in spite of the fact that we got an oversubscription of our Eurobond, we got an oversubscription of our Cocoa syndicated loan.
We issued the Eurobond at a coupon rate of 8.125%. If you compare that to any other Eurobond that is issued on the international market, it's a very high interest rate, and it will by all means attract attention because it's there. The reason why people bought into it is because they still have confidence that government will honor its debt obligations irrespective of what rate it offers. If you look at just around about that same time, two or three months before, Ivory Coast offered a bond which was less interest. Kenya also did one, I think, in Tanzania, and the interest rates were much lower. So yes, people went for it, but I'm saying that they went for it because the interest rate was good in comparison to everything else on the marketplace, and not particularly because the Ghana government's economic management and its economic situation is far better than anything else. The confidence is not in the actual performance of our economy. The confidence is in the fact that we will pay back and the rate is very good. And that, for me, is why it was that way. As to the cocoa bond, well, we always do the cocoa bond. We have done significantly a lot more than now, but that's because we've always needed to do a lot more than what we were doing. I think we set a record at some point at 1.5. This is a new record, and it also enables us to at least be able to go forward, because there's also an additional 200 million that they could tap into if required. So Ghana is still a very strong cocoa economy. We are still number 2 in the world. Our premium cocoa still sells very high. So there's a lot of confidence in that particular product. And cocoa prices on the market are not doing that badly. So there's a lot of confidence in the collateralization of how much we can bring to bear on the bond that we have borrowed. So in that regard, yes, there is confidence in that. And our crop is still doing 800,000 plus metric tons. So there is a certain measure of confidence in it.
In spite of that, it goes on to say that our gross international reserves remain low. How does this tell on that?
Well, at the moment it is low. When we start generating a little bit more surplus, it will go up. I don't think that there is a particular benchmark for how much that figure should be. We have tended to roll it up when things are a lot better. And, for me, that feature is really, it's neither here nor there, even though it's a good macro indicator for international financiers to focus on. But that is not our problem. Our problem is in the micromanagement of the economy, and it's in the cash management of the economy. I think the macro indicators are an afterthought of everything that you have done within the micro environment. So we have to do the right things at the lower level in order for us to see the end results at the macro level.
Sini, I'm going to have you hold the line just briefly. Kweku Kwatin is joining our conversation. He's Member of Parliament for Obuasi West. Kweku, earlier you had mentioned that the International Monetary Fund statement brings into question government's initial claims it was only going to the fund for policy credibility. Why so?
Well, that was the point government made, that it was going to the IMF for policy credibility. That is to say, government itself was implementing some strategies, but somehow people did not believe that they were really serious about these strategies, or that they were honest about these strategies, and that if they got involved with the IMF, somehow that credibility will come. at the time, the caution some of us sounded was that, look, your economy is in difficulty, you need help. You're going to the IMF for help. We know that the IMF would impose certain conditionalities, things you must do in order to secure the kind of help you want from them. Those things you must do would have impact on the everyday lives of people. So government ought to be honest about this and to say, going to the IMF, we'll have to make sacrifices we are not making in the past, and let people be prepared for the IMF conditionalities. But the way government put it was to suggest that it will be business as usual. There's nothing to fear, and that we are only going for policy credibility. Now, the discussion that government has had with the IMF suggests that if government would really secure the bailout sustainably, I say sustainably because the IMF will not just give you the money at a go. They give you some, they look at your conduct, they give you more. Now, if government is going to secure that, then we're going to do things different from we have done in the past. So it is not just about credibility, it is about doing things in a new way. Even if these are interventions we have always discussed, the fact is that in order that we can get the IMF support, we must do things in a new way. And government now have to explain to the people of Ghana how, even though we went...
But Kweku, when you look at some of the recommendations and the conclusions of the statements, these were things, some of which government had already told the Ghanaian people it intended to implement, if some are not already underway. When you look at the subsidy removal, government had made mention that indeed it was going to take a second look at subsidies on our petroleum products. And you pick the public debts as well. Government had mentioned that it was going to work on the public wage as far as the purse is concerned. So these are things we already knew.
Yeah, there are things we have known since Adam. It is not a discussion that started with government. Having to deal with the public sector wage bill, the public sector reforms, the question of subsidies, whether we're targeting it properly. These are old discussions. And the government only re-echoed what previous governments, including the NPP, had talked about in the past. So in terms of talking about it, there's nothing new. What is new is that if government really wants to access the support of the IMF, then it must do things different. It is the doing things different that is new in this equation.
Okay, let's try and identify that different thing, because in reading the statement, the IMF had identified government's problem as being the implementation of some of these policies, which they admit we already knew about. And so what's the different element, Kweku Kwatin, you see?
Let me just explain with one example. Subsidy in the 2014 budget statement, when the finance ministry came to Parliament, and specifically when they made a parliamentary subcommittee on finance, they had budgeted 50 million Ghana cedis for subsidy, petroleum subsidy in 2014. And some of us at the time questioned that just in the previous year, you needed to pay subsidy to a tune, or you owed subsidy to a tune of almost 2 billion Ghana cedis. You are now budgeting, 50 million? You think is realistic? And the response we got from the Ministry of Finance was that it is because in 2014, we are going to apply the automatic adjustment formula. We are confident it will lead to a huge reduction in the subsidy payments. By the middle of the year, when government came to Parliament, we had incurred, just the first part, we had incurred 650 million. Now, if you look at the original projection, 50 million, it means by the middle, you would have expected some 25 million. Instead of 25, we have really incurred 650 million. Now, if you say that, well, as for subsidy removal, it has always been part of my policy, so the IMF has brought nothing new. The question is that it is not just a talking, it is a doing. And what is going to have to be new is that government would have to do the things we have all been talking about since Adam. And I'm saying that that is going to come with consequences for everyday life. And government has to stop saying that we are going there just for policy credibility, but to tell Ghanaians that because we messed up the economy, we are now going to swallow IMF pills. What the pills means is that public sector would have to be dealt with, that subsidy will have to, it won't just be about talking. We're really going to have to remove subsidy. We're going to do this in terms of revenue mobilization, that we're going to cut exemptions. We're doing that. Government has to be honest about this and stop saying that it is for policy credibility and that it's our own homegrown policies. No. If we go on, I'm landing, if we go on the way we were before we went into the IMF program, trust me, the IMF bailout will not come.
Kweku, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Kweku Kwatin is Member of Parliament for Obuasi West. Sydney Kesley Hayford is the financial analyst, is still here with me. We're having a conversation about the end of mission statement from the IMF team that visited Ghana, statement released on the 26th of September. So Sydney, let's continue where we left off. When you look at some of the challenges they identified or vulnerabilities they identified with the economy, they mentioned the fact that within this period, imports declined substantially due to slower growth and a large depreciation of the currency. And I want to find the relationship between the fact that imports declined, yet we couldn't take advantage of it to increase our exports. Neither could we take advantage of the fact that imports had declined, considering the fact that we have always identified imports as one of the challenges of this economy, the reason this economy cannot grow as fast as we expect it to grow. What was the problem there?
The problem is timing. You cannot just say, well, let me use the exact thing that you brought up, that the economic activity has declined and imports have slowed down. And there's a direct link there, because if economic activity is booming and people are buying products in the marketplace, then of course the traders are going to go and bring some more goods and imports will increase. Now, just because we have a temporary situation, it doesn't mean that suddenly manufacturing and industry will be able to kick in. Before you bring a product to the market, it takes a long time. And especially if it's a product which you're going to actually, let's say, develop, add value to. If, for example, a Ghanaian wants to do mango juice in this country, first of all, he needs to make sure he has a supply of mangoes. He has to make sure he has a factory. He has to make sure he has the packaging. You can't do that in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 2 months. It takes 2 to 3 years. So it has to be identified today. And it has to be clear for the person who's going to invest that over the next 3 years, that situation will still exist so that he can substitute the imported items in order for him to be able to manufacture locally. So whichever way you play it, you can't just do it overnight. And that's the situation that you are referring to. Economic activity has gone down. Imports have decreased, and there's a direct link. The depreciation of the cedi was a classic issue, not because of anything else, but because we put in measures that were not practical. And therefore, you created a lot of nervousness in the system for traders who wanted to buy dollars. When that happened, automatically, over a period of 4 or 5 months, the amount of activity decreased, and there was a lot of pressure on the cedi, and therefore the cedi depreciated against the major currencies. There's a reason why that happened. And all of these things take time to filter through an economic model. Just because you do something today doesn't mean that tomorrow it will work, except if you want to shoot somebody. If you shoot them, they are dead. It's done. If they get sick, it can take a period of time before they die. This is the way that you have to look at it. I'm using a morbid example, but it's the most vivid way I can describe the whole situation.
Now, as the country toes the path of economic revival, is it possible for the country to also take advantage of the fact that as it stands now, imports have reduced substantially?
Sorry, I don't get the question there.
I'm saying now we want to revive the economy. We're putting it on that revival lane. But we have also been told that our imports have declined. And you have explained why this could be so, and yet we are not seeing any proper results on the economic outlook. Is it
Mm-hmm.
possible that going forward we could take advantage of this? And how do we even do that?
Okay, this is why the whole program that is being considered is broken down into a short-term measures and the medium to long-term measures. The short-term measures, we are caught in it because we are in a situation where we don't have cash, and we need to bring some cash in. The CD dollar rate has helped because we have brought in a lot of dollars into the economy now from the cocoa fund and from the sovereign bond, and therefore you are seeing a slight change in the purchasing power, in the difference of the exchange rate between the CD and the dollar. If you're going to fix the economy, your medium to long-term solutions have to be very well mapped out, and there has to be encouragement to the private sector to step in and start manufacturing in such a way that when we are not able to bring in everything, we are importing from toothpicks all the way up to energy turbines. Somewhere along the line, all the things that we can do in this country, we must start doing. To do that, you need to incentivize the manufacturing sector, give it significant tax breaks, and offer it the opportunity to be able to export out of this country when they are ready. Now, you need to do that. You need to start that today and expect it to come on stream in about 3-4 years' time. So if we are going to fix the way things go, we have to start doing it now. And whilst we are doing all of that, we have to take care of the short term because we need cash to be able to meet payroll every a month on year and ensure that we can get some macroeconomic stability as we go forward. So you need to start today and expect to see the results 3 or 4 years down the line. It won't happen next year. It won't happen in 2 years. It's going to go past the 2-3 year cycle and get you there by 4 or 5 years.
Well, we'll turn attention to the CD now. The fact that the IMF has said that over time, we all know about the weakening of the national currency, and the IMF has identified that recently it started recovering. But you on the other hand, you do not think the CD is appreciating in any form. Why so?
Well, because you see, first of all, economically and financially, you cannot change the value of a currency within 3 weeks. I don't know what kind of magic produces that, but we are a country of witchcraft and marriage and magic. So we tend to think that all these things are possible. It's not possible, number one. Number two, I'll give you two opposite sides of the coin. The CD started depreciating after we had the central bank bringing in rules and regulations that were not practical, and that created panic. People then started reacting by going to buy as much dollars as they can. When you have a huge shift in the supply and demand of a commodity, the thing that happens is that the price of the commodity goes up, and people are stuck with buying at that price. So there is the real value of the currency, and then there's the speculative value that has been added onto it. So that started in February. So between February, March, April, all the way through to June, when most of those were reversed, you could see that the currency was under a lot of stress and it depreciated significantly. Now, what has happened recently in September and August, late August into September, is that you have got a lot of dollars have come into the system, not because we have generated those dollars, but because we have borrowed that money. We went and borrowed $1 billion, and we went and borrowed $1.7 billion for cocoa. You put all of that on the back of the measures that have been reversed by the central bank to correct the mistake that it made in February. Now you are beginning to see a certain normalization of the transaction exchange. That change in the value from the 3.8, 3.9, sometimes to 4 CDs to $1, down to where we are today, about 3.1, 3.2, is the speculative elements that I mentioned earlier. The speculation of people thinking that they could not get dollars raised the exchange value. Now you've got the speculative element, which has been eliminated, and it is bringing the value down to a certain level. It has not changed the value of the currency. The value of the currency stays the same, but you've removed the speculative element because it was artificial. So that is what we have. And it will only become clear when we go through a long period of time When we go through 3, 4, maybe 5 months, and the CD rate is still the same, then you know that you have got an appreciable value in the exchange rate, but not overnight, not within 3 weeks, within 4 weeks. It can't happen that way. It's impossible.
I see. Now, let's look at the recommendations now. We'll turn attention to the recommendation. We'll start off with the fact that the statement says that we would need a more ambitious and front-loaded fiscal consolidation to help place our public debt on a sustainable path and allow monetary policy to be more effective in bringing down inflation, including by strictly limiting budget deficit financing by the Bank of Ghana. What does this mean?
Okay. The most fundamental thing the IMF is saying there is that the amount of income that we are generating is not enough to cover our expenses. Hence, there's an emphasis on trying to manage the payroll better, because that's really is the bulk of the expenses. We need to manage that payroll either through the ghost names that we have, the size of the payroll itself, the number of persons that we are paying, together with all the ancillary costs that come with payroll. So that is the one big thing that you're talking about, and that's where the fiscal deficit issue comes into play. The important thing now is they are urging government to find mechanisms by which they can bring in more revenue. If economic activity is down, our import levies are down. If economic activity is down, then corporate taxes are down. When corporate taxes and companies are not doing well, they can't pay their staff, they lay off people, therefore income taxes are down. There's a chain reaction with just one simple thing that takes place, and that is the downturn in economic activity. So how do you get economic activity working? Well, first of all, you can't tax people too much, because when you overtax them, they start dodging your taxes and they start running away. So the government has to make a very big paradigm shift between whether it is going to tax little and broaden the net, or tax plenty and restrict itself only to a handful of people. And I say they should do the first option. You've got to drop the taxes, get economic activity going, and allow people to come into play so you can get their taxable earnings. So that is what they mean by that particular statement. The statement is very, very clearly worded for those of us who are in that financial arena. It is very clearly worded to say that you are not managing the cash situation very well, and your income and expenditure are out of step. You cannot continue running a deficit forever, because the only way you can hold a deficit down in the short term is to borrow money. The more money you borrow, the more of a burden you are creating going down the line for the future, and the more difficult it will be, because you have to keep on earning more income in order to be able to pay off the debt. So you're getting yourself into a spiral. The Ministry of Finance and government knows this.
Let's look at the public wage costs and the fact that this is a problem we've been talking about for a very long time. Government had indicated its interest to deal with this. And one of the ways he intended to deal with it was to introduce GIFMIS so that we can check public payroll system and what goes in and out of it. And now, as part of our recommendations, again, we see public wage costs. The minority from the beginning had told us that this could mean that loss of jobs in the public sector. How do we reconcile the fact that we have tried? It doesn't seem to be working. And the fact that the minority has also told the Ghanaian people you should expect some job losses within the public sector. How do you interpret the two?
All right, let me deal with two things: the GIFMIS thing and then the job losses. Okay, what you have to understand is that GIFMIS is an accounting package. All right, it's an accounting program. It is not a solution like a program in that sense of the word. It is just an application that is used to enable us to account for the money that we are spending a lot better. Number two, GIFMIS is not a payroll program. The payroll program that is supposed to ensure that we are able to manage our payroll better is a program called Hyperion, which is going to be attached to GIFMIS. And you have to understand that clearly. If you say GIFMIS, it's a little misleading. But the Hyperion program, which government has negotiated to install, is going to manage the payroll. Now, to do that, you have to make sure that you've got a good, clean database of the payroll. Most of the payroll fraud that you are seeing in terms of the ghost names and people paying too much, etc., is coming from the two biggest sectors of government payroll management, which is in education and health. And what government needs to do, particularly in education, because education has the largest number of employed people by government has to look at it very carefully and then sanitize that payroll. Only after it has sanitized that payroll and knows very clearly how many people it actually contracts and pays, then it can start looking at whether it has too many people or too few people and how it can rationalize that system. So it's a multi-stage thing that has to be done. It also dovetails into decentralization, where the districts, municipalities, and metropolises have to be given the authority to manage their own payroll. That way, they are accountable and responsible for whether their payroll goes out or goes too high.
Okay, so
if you break it up, you can manage it better.
With that understanding, are job losses imminent?
I think that job losses are not imminent, but what it says is that persons who are benefiting from extra names on the payroll and extra payroll costs linked to certain perks should get ready that can be eliminated if government takes the right steps and does the right thing. I don't see that we should lose any jobs, because my suggestion has always been that when it comes to education, government should think very clearly of handing back the schools which it took over from the mission schools and also from some private sector, and allow those particular organizations to take back what government annexed. And so government can reduce its burden on the payroll. When you do that, all you're doing is transferring the cost of those staff to the private sector, and private sector will absorb them, and they will manage the schools better. You can't take a school and say the school has got 30 people, I don't want 30 people, I only want 10, so you sack 2. You can't do that because you have about 600 students to take care of, and there's a minimum number of teachers and attendants you need to be able to run that school. So you won't lose that many jobs. And the most important thing is to focus on the education sector. Keep the education sector sanitized. Really look at it, and you won't lose that many jobs across the board.
Sydney, thank you very much for your time here on News Desk. Sydney Kesley-Hayford is a financial analyst. Now, there's more to come on our conversation around the end of mission statement by the IMF team that visited Ghana. Also to come, Ghana tops teacher absenteeism report in West Africa. We'll get into that in a bit. Don't worry.